And we got inside the head of one of their technology leaders who told us how many people in these health insurance companies are dedicated to building AI to find mistakes or missing information in medical records in order to automatically what's called approve claim, but you can look at it from deny claim perspective. The company, which is very well known, has an army of people, 4,000 engineers and data scientists doing this work. And that told us that compliance in healthcare will be even more important because now the payer side gets the superpower of finding all simple mistakes traditionally buried under layers of documentation. And we wrote about that twice. And we explained that we are a compliance platform. We work across these industries. We already have revenue in some of them. But we think that we want to focus on one thing: healthcare documentation compliance.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're thrilled to have Dmitry Karpov on the program. He's CEO and co-founder of WorkDone. He's a two-time YC founder, ex-EY innovation leader, Forbes Cloud 100 Rising Star. Maybe you can tell us what all that means. After co-founding Electronique, he's now tackling one of healthcare's costliest and least visible problems: documentation errors that lead to denied insurance claims. His company WorkDone is building a real-time AI compliance co-pilot for hospitals, already live with clinics and piloting with some enterprise health systems. Thanks for coming on, Dmitry.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, why don't we start at the beginning? Like maybe you could walk us through your founder's journey from, childhood experiences all the way to, founding your first company, and then we'll get to work done.
Thank you. Childhood actually is a good place to start. I was born and grew up in Russia, nearby Moscow, in a very remote scientific town. Around 20,000 people living there. And when I was around 13 years old, I've learned about Magic the Gathering, the trading card game, very popular in the States by that moment. And I took a lot of my savings and I bought some of these cards on eBay, like a big pack, mix and match. And I was able to promote Magic the Gathering as a trading game in my hometown. And at the same time, Wizards of the Coast, the vendor of this game, started to do promotions in like PC Magazine, other stuff where kids from my hometown could read about it. So it became a very popular thing, and I was the only one vendor or supplier of these cards in my hometown, and I repeated the scheme of buying stuff on eBay, transferred to my hometown, and then selling that to kids. And I think I got a lot of money that originally were given to kids for lunches, and they were spent it on trading cards. And I essentially ran a kind of small drug cartel empire in my hometown. Actually, my mom once asked me, like, Dmitry, are you selling drugs or something bad? Because you're not asking for for spare money anymore. I see a lot of purchases from your side, and a lot of small kids are like knocking on our apartment door in the evening to get something. And it was a really cool experience for me being an entrepreneur at that age. But once I moved to Moscow to study at university there, I looked at people who play Magic there. They looked super nerdy, and I decided that I don't want my personal brand to be affiliated with such people at that moment, and quit playing Magic the Gathering for many, many years. Luckily, in 2015, when I was living in New York, my wife saw some of these cards, asked me a couple of questions. We bought a set. I taught her how to play, and now I'm back to playing Magic even above the level I was doing that when I was a child, and now play professionally and participate in tournaments. It's one of my major hobbies outside of business.
That's amazing. You know, what's funny is I just bought my first deck. Well, I bought 4 decks because I had a friend come for my birthday recently, a couple of weeks ago. And he's like, hey, we got to do Magic the Gathering. He keeps saying he's been trying to get me to play for years. I'm like, great, let's just go down and buy some decks. So yeah. We bought like 4 different Commander decks, and I bought the whole. You play Commander? That's kind of the most popular.
That's my favorite. I usually play it every, I think, 8 weeks when a new set is being released. I'm going to a place in my town now, and I know San Francisco has a lot of big players, like those who spend like a fortune on their cards.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, a lot of money floating in San Francisco. But I want to revisit the import export Magic the Gathering business. Like, what was the margin on that? Like, how much money were you making?
Like, it's not even measured in percents. It's measured in roughly between 10x to 100x per card. That's pretty much the arbitrage.
They just couldn't get them anywhere else. It's like, so you pay $1 and sell it for $10, or
Yeah, roughly.
$100?
Buy it for 10 cents and sell it for $10, roughly.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so you're just printing money, and that's, I find that a lot of founders have this entrepreneurial, story somewhere in their background. Is
Like I
that
said,
the case? Most people you get to know that are founders, like they have this like teenage experience of something like that.
not necessarily, but they did some weird stuff, definitely, like as
Yeah,
teenagers. Like usually very uncommon hobbies or some significant achievements in things that some people consider boring, let's say chess, for instance. Like because it requires a lot of dedication and grit to succeed in these things, plus some intellectual capabilities. Not my
yeah.
case. Despite my last name being Karpov, I sucks at chess. I suck at.
That's amazing. So eventually you made your way from Russia to the US. Like, tell us that story.
I studied the scientific town where I'm from. We had a process similar to Harry Potter assignment to college, man. You pick up a hat and it tells one of the four houses. In my case, it was four STEM directions: mathematics, biology, chemistry, physics. And if you pursue one of these tracks, because of the talent around you or scholars and teachers, there's a good chance to get scholarship in best university, which was my case. I studied physics at Moscow State University, and after that, you can pretty much apply to any grad school in the world and continue your studies there. So I realized pretty quickly in my university years that I didn't want to spend all my time in physics. I loved what I was doing in optics and lasers. We essentially used three laser beams to catch an atom and make it temperature close to zero because it feels the light pressure from all six sides. And it allows you to study how materials behave at sub-zero temperatures, essentially, which is very interesting, but at the same time requires you to work in a dark lab, spend a lot of time analyzing results. And usually both of that doesn't involve communication to people, which is actually, as I later discovered, one of my strongest side and one of the things I truly enjoy. So I applied to grad school in the States, moved here, but very soon started my first company, real company. It was a social media analytics agency. It was very wild times of social media getting advertising budgets and PR budgets and brand budgets, providing very little quantitative information to those who pay on the outcomes. So what's the real coverage? What's the real audience? What's the sentiment of the audience, and so on. I started an agency powered by software with two of my friends back from Russia, and we got acquired very quickly, in a year and a half. As soon as we got acquired, I quit science and I moved to Washington, D.C. to study at Georgetown.
Yeah. What did you study at Georgetown?
I got an MBA and I also studied at School of Foreign Service for like a mutual degree program.
And then what did you do coming out of the MBA?
I joined a big company, as most of my classmates did, but for a very interesting role, in my opinion. It was innovation at Ernst & Young. Pretty much EY at that moment realized that very big industry, audit and tax, are on the brink of disruption from technology, and they need to start doing something to optimize internally, plus to provide better services to clients. And it was very right bet for Big Four, I think, because it's exactly what happened in the next 10 years. First, workflow automation, and then agentic automation now just fundamentally disrupts traditional consulting, accounting, and audit businesses. So I joined EY and I started to work for the US leadership. It's called EY Americas, scouting technologies that could potentially benefit the firm in the long run. And I was very lucky to attach myself to technology called robotic process automation. And that's a way to automate workflow in any computer system because you automate on the level of graphic user interface. So you pretty much build a workflow that replicates real human actions in systems, and it looks like an invisible human touches the keyboard and operates the mouse in order to complete the exact instruction given to this virtual robot. So with RPA, you can do a lot, and we became one of the leaders in the market in implementing this technology internally. And for our clients, I moved to global, moved from New York to Palo Alto to San Francisco, and that's where life accelerated a lot. And in 2019, with my friends again from Russia, who were at the time implementing RPA for big banks and oil companies, decided to start own vendor in the space, and that's where story of Electronique kicks in. Went very quickly from zero to a couple hundred K ARR. We went to YC, grew up to mostly 1 million. Then COVID came. We mostly killed our business. We found very strong product market fit in one of our segments, system integrators. Then quickly in a year and a half grew to Series A. and then scaled the company to operate. I think the clients now are in 50 countries or something like this, included all countries of Western Hemisphere except of one.
So it's interesting. So you guys got into YC, which you guys fit the mold, right? Like smart, well-educated friends that went to school together. Like that's kind of like the quintessential YC team, I feel like.
Not exactly. We didn't go to school together. And I think even by that time we were older than most of our batch mates. Like now in 2025, in our batch, Paul gave a speech and he asked who here is born earlier than 1999. And it was just a few people, I think
Wow.
less than 10% raising their hands. So there are many great founders of all ages.
I feel like it has skewed younger over the years. You know, back when I started investing in YC companies, like I feel like a lot of the teams were in their 30s and they were like on their second or third startup together and they had like 500K of ARR. They're just really far along, you know, further along, I think. And I think right now, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but you know, we're in a platform shift with AI. And so I feel like the teams are kind of skewing a little younger, kind of with this platform shift.
I think it all comes down to the personal traits of founders and less to their industry experience. I was fascinated by many of our batchmates in terms of like what problems they focus on, how specific they are sometimes, how narrow they are. And they do have experience in this field, but 3 years or something of exposure to a real problem for someone typically is enough to figure out what approach to take at least in addressing that problem. And I would say that's a very different experience of going into YC when you already have, I think we had 300 at the time, and you have pretty much zero when you're starting. Because when you have zero, you're much more receptive to advice and feedback that YC partners and community can give you. And that really increases the value of being there. For me, at least, it was like 5x more value from the second run than from the first run.
Well, maybe, yeah, let's unpack that a bit because that was going to be probably my next question. It sounds like you guys are pretty successful with the first startup. Maybe you can kind of give like put a coda on that, like how that ended, and then what drove the decision to go through YC for a second time. I see a lot of that now.
So as I said before, when we started Electronique, we had half of our team roughly operating from Russia in terms of like small founding team. And then we scaled all our R&D out of there. And when the war started with Ukraine, we had 70 people, something working full-time in Moscow and nearby areas. We moved around the globe over time, but it happened just that some part of the team decided to settle there. And we just decided to separate the journeys. And I really wanted to build an AI in the States. And that was much easier to do when you don't have a big portion of the business and the company operating out of Russia. So that was my personal decision to step away and to start working on agentic automation, specifically in compliance area. But the company is still alive, does well, and let's see how it goes. It really depends on the geopolitics sometimes.
And yeah, what drove that decision to go to YC for a second time? Did you guys enter with the idea for WorkDone, or did that kind of pivot your way to it after you got into YC? Tell us kind of the founding story there.
So I started to do customer development, just going through my personal contact list, typically talk to big companies about whether they see opportunities and challenges coming from AI. And, because of the nature of my previous work at UI, I have a lot of compliance leaders and pretty much a lot of people who work in audit and tax across corporate America. And we started to kind of map different hypotheses of what can be done where agentic automation can do something that addresses a real problem and at the same time does it well enough for customers to adopt something. Because agentic automation can do everything, like potentially, like describe me a problem that AI agents would not be able to do or robots would not be able to do down the road. I would be happy to debate that. It's just a question of time, but they will be able to do it. But what the customers will be willing to pay for today. And we developed a set of industries where we think that compliance, addressing compliance from manual to AI-driven user agents will provide the most impact. And we already sold to a couple of companies in construction space. One of the biggest construction companies in the world, they were looking at WorkDone as a tool to automate a lot of checkboxes that they need to do, like checking all safety certificates of all subcontractors. Done. So a lot of cost reductions are available there. Plus, in construction, compliance is important from safety perspective. But healthcare was number two. We didn't have any clients there. But more we learned about compliance being sometimes less cost center, but revenue center, denied claims, patient lawsuits, a lot of these things that essentially financially impact operations. We realized that healthcare is pretty unique from impact agents can do. A lot of technical challenges there, but it's great to attract great engineering talent to address them. And plus, clients potentially can pay for, but sales cycles are long. That's kind of the downside of this industry.
But kind of
So
sticky
we
too. If
just
you're able to sell them,
right,
it's hard for them to rip it out. There's
right,
like pros and
and then
cons, right? Yeah.
yes, and then we had third industry, insurance. And we talked to one big health insurance company in February this year. And by that moment, we already had a very rough MVP of the product to do demos. And we got inside the head of one of their technology leaders who told us how many people in these health insurance companies are dedicated to building AI to find mistakes or missing information in medical records in order to automatically what's called the proof claim, but you can look at it from deny claim perspective. The company, which is very well known, has an army of people, 4,000 engineers and data scientists doing this work. And that told us that compliance in healthcare will be even more important because now the payer side gets the superpower of finding all simple mistakes traditionally buried under layers of documentation. And we wrote about that twice. And we explain that we are a compliance platform. We work across these industries. We already have revenue in some of them, but we think that we want to focus on one thing: healthcare documentation compliance. And it just increased my desire to accept the YC terms, which are founder friendly at the same time. Still, when you build it again, that's a big question that you ask yourself whether you want to do it again. And because we decided that we started from scratch, essentially at this moment, we accepted. And thanks to the whole YC community who supported our application, I think we had a crazy number of recommendations from YC founders. We decided to move on.
Yeah. So it's pretty incredible because you went through YC 5, 6 years ago, 2019, you said?
2020,
Winter 2020.
the last batch before COVID started.
Yeah.
So we didn't have demo day. When I pitched a demo day, I said to myself, like, I waited for this demo day for 5 years.
That's funny. What was different about, I mean, besides the obvious, like, running into COVID, right, in winter 2020, but late winter, what was different, 5 years later?
I value a lot what Gary 10, I think, did to YC in general, but not only. I think the culture changed a lot, became much more open. Feedback became more common. If you look at partner talks, they're much more direct. They're more partners who had significant entrepreneurial experience. I have a lot of stories to share. I really like working with my previous YC partners as well. They're absolutely great people. But I was in cohort with Tom Blomfield and Pete and Gary Tan himself. That was an amazing experience just with partners being there, stripped of everything else. Also, it changed a lot as YC social launch. Now it's an opportunity to test any hypothesis and scale. And it didn't exist 5 years ago. Yes, YC did social highlight of use a company, but I don't think we got anything from that launch. And that really, not speaking about only my own personal experience, but for the whole batch, that's opportunity before demo day to go on stage, to tell the world what you're doing, got the real world feedback. Maybe it will be zero feedback and you will pivot if you want. That really makes sense of like an accelerator program where you have an opportunity to measure the interest in what you're building in front of a big crowd.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and it is that question, right? Because you're like, should I do this again? I've done this before. Do I want to take the 7% equity hit for the 125? And then, but somebody phrased it like this to me, and I thought it was really brilliant. It's like, well, will the company increase in value more than 7%? For taking the 7% hit? Like the answer for YC is yeah, hell yeah, like definitely, because you come out at 20 or 30 caps typically.
When you're doing that again, you realize that valuations at all rounds, they don't really matter. What matters is the valuation in the end.
It's funny in real estate. In real estate, there's this old phrase like you make your money when you buy.
Exactly.
Meaning like you got to get a good deal to make a great deal. But like I feel like in startups, it's almost like the opposite. You make your money when you sell.
That's true. And I think that's if you look at it from that perspective, I think it's better to compare probably your chances of survival rather than increase in the round value or valuation or whatever metric you apply in the moment. You're just buying probably greater chance for your venture to succeed. And it has a price tag to that. Debatable how good it is, but worked out so far so well. I really think we would not be able to generate so much interest from health tech community and medical community to a certain degree, if not YC. And I was super surprised to see how many health tech investors, how many medical doctors who are angels are active at demo day, and what caliber of these investors we were able to get on board, including you.
Well, thank you. I'm blushing. So for listeners who aren't familiar, what exactly does WorkDone do, and how does it integrate with hospital EHRs?
So we find mistakes in medical records before they become a problem. And what kind of problem could be with a medical record? Quality of care. If for some reason the information on your medical record does not represent the true opinion of medical provider about your condition, you can get into trouble. But on top of that, there are numerous financial implications. Let me be specific here. When someone is in a hospital and they're moving between intense care unit and recovery unit, there should be a note in their medical record that says the patient can do XYZ on their own, like go to a restroom, for instance. And this is just a note. But if it's not there, it looks like we haven't asked the patient. And when a payer insurance company will see that this note is missing, they can say to the hospital that quality of care was not enough and that claim would not be paid at 100%, would be paid at 80%. So these costs of medical information mistakes when it comes to denied claims are often eaten by hospitals because it's their problem, not the patient problem.
How big of a problem is that? Like on average, for like how much of this insurance dinging you 20 or 30%? How big of a problem is that?
In the United States, there are 900 million claims denied every year. Around 25% of them are being denied because there's something in medical records. And then it comes to two types of mistakes. Some are fixable. Let's say there is conflicting date of birth. If insurance company will receive that, they may reject the payment, but the provider will fix the mistake and resubmit. It just increases their working capital and then the need for to wait for this money to get paid. But the insurance company will pay them in the end of the day. But if something else, let's say an assessment of someone's condition is missing, and that assessment was required to make a clinical decision according to, let's say, American Heart Association, then the claim could be 100% denied. And we are specifically focusing on those mistakes that could be prevented in real time. That requires us connecting to medical records and essentially using AI agents to extract information from there, which is unstructured to many degree, and then to identify potential mistakes. We look at around 6,000 rules coming from regulatory bodies, state, federal associations, different standards for medical records, industry regulation itself. The major actor there will be the Joint Commission. It's a peer group of doctors that comes to a hospital to open medical records of recently discharged patients to start digging into what could be the problem there. But denied claims is still just one of the areas. The financial impact is estimated to be 70 billion, 70. It's big, but it's still just one pillar of financial trouble. The second one is patient lawsuits. Surprisingly, that's something that keeps most of the compliance leaders awake at night at hospitals, because when patients start a lawsuit on the quality of care, whatever is the basis for this lawsuit, the first thing they will do, they will take all the medical records and will give them to their lawyers. And their lawyers will try to find something that doesn't fit regulatory standard. For instance, presence of conflicting information. I would say you went to a small bike accident and you're admitted to a hospital. And then the nurse says that you have pain in your left shoulder. The doctor's note says you have pain in your right shoulder. If something will happen to your left or right shoulder later and you'll sue the hospital because something was not provided correctly, that will be the reason for the judge to award all money to you because that's a clinical mistake. So all hospitals are regulated by law to have a process to find conflicting information in medical records.
I've heard some crazy stories about this where like they amputate the wrong like foot or whatever, stuff like that.
That's an extreme, right? But there are many things.
Can you imagine? Oh my God.
Usually it's more missing than conflicting, but conflicting is the most painful thing. So what hospitals do, they have teams of clinicians, nurses, and doctors that sit and manually review records of their patients for the same purposes that our software does. And then if they find something, they usually call a doctor or a nurse.
So this is an important thing that you're saying right here. As an investor, when I hear that, my ears perk up because there's a problem and there's a way to solve it right now, and they're doing it in a less than efficient way, right? There's a lot of friction and there's a budget, right? There's people that they're paying right now. They're paying money to solve this problem. So how much money are hospitals paying? And like, so what's that like value prop look like when you sell to them? They're like, hey, you're already spending $1 million a year. And really, like, all these denied claims and legal suits. So you're spending money to prevent those. And even that's not 100%, right? Humans make errors 5-10% of the time.
Even not making errors, just being able to review all the documents is impossible. That's why internal audit procedure in all companies across all industries is usually based on sampling. You take a sample of something, you apply the rules.
And then dig in if you find an error in that area, right?
That's right. What's called audit coverage ratio means what portion of information is being reviewed compared to all information. It really depends from industry to industry, but all companies would like to have 100% internal audit coverage ratio. Because if it's done right, then you would not have any surprises with anything. We can look at any process, but financial audit will be the best case. Fortune 500 pay a lot for external financial audit, and they also pay for internal audit. And they pay to big four companies, one company to external audit, one to do internal one. They do it to have less surprises in the end of the external, because these surprises are the most costly. But at the same time, internal audit is always limited in resources. It's impossible to review 100%. At least it was impossible until recently. And I think that from pocket to pocket, this kind of quality, in the end of the day, it's quality problem. Things will be addressed. We just decide to pick up one of the most challenging one because there are numerous barriers for connecting to customer records, long sales cycles, enormous volume of data. If you are in a hospital, the volume of documentation that's being produced on you is huge because every nurse will check on you twice during your 12-hour shift. You will be checked on 4 times. Matter vitals, ask questions, and that creates a huge lot of information that doesn't fit. Like for many hospital patients, all medical records would not fit the context window of any LLM. So a lot of technical problems addressing that in healthcare, and we decided to, okay, that's a big enough problem. And in the end of the day, if we do our problem well, we also improve the quality of care. Because if all information is there, it means it was considered, and it means that people follow clinical protocols. Clinical protocols is an interesting thing. If you look at your insurance company website, you can search on that website clinical guidance or documentation standards, and you will see that if you have one of these 50 different diseases diagnoses, the insurance company have a prescribed way to treat you. It's very specific. There's a set of rules, but there's so many of them. Huge number, thousands and thousands.
I was going to ask the next question, which is, what's technically hardest about this real-time compliance in clinical environments? Like, what's been the most technical challenge for you guys? Hardest technical challenges so far?
While compliance problem in general seems logical how to address with agents. You have a data, you take this data via API call, you have rules, you apply one against another, produce some insights. It becomes really challenging when you're fighting false positives. Because if you give someone a tool that has false positives for compliance, the adoption of this tool likely would not be great. But at the same time, on
maybe you can
side,
explain what a false positive is for the audience.
We found a mistake, but that mistake does not exist. And we notify a provider or a compliance team that you should pay attention to this. They open the file and they see that the exact thing that we're saying them is wrong is actually there and it's right. False positives will always exist when you deal with LLMs. The question is, what's the customer experience with them? And it means that on top of just connecting data to LLM, you need to think about the application layer that will ensure, first of all, high quality of outcomes. It means you find, in the best case, all mistakes, or at least majority of them, versus not having false positives. So your product needs to exercise a lot of judgment in the area of what's going on there. Second one, as in any other compliance process, you need to prioritize then your findings, because there's so many potential mistakes or mistakes that are minor. How you pay attention of providers, doctors, and nurses to the most important things. And that's another, it's less about the technology, it's more about the IP, but how exactly you do that, how you make the decision. Very similar question to like autopilot for cars. If you have an old person and a young person and you have a chance to hit one of them, whom you would decide, how you build this judgment, very similar to documentation mistakes. Hospital is a living organization. There are people working there. How you prioritize and what mistakes to look first, how you prioritize that. Because every time you bring a mistake to a provider, it means you taking some of the time from them providing the care to patients. So you need to be very careful here. And now it's completely human judgment exercised by compliance teams and clinical documentation improvement teams at hospitals. We actually don't sell, when it comes to hospital, we don't sell this as the cost reduction in terms of them reducing budgets for the headcount on manual reviews. We just tell them that the same team can now do 3, 4x, 5x more than they do before, which directly impacts all the metrics from the operations that are well known. We just think we will 5x your team to bring you 0.5% of new revenue, because you'll have less denials. And that 0.5% scale of a big hospital is a very big thing.
How do you, so basically you keep the reviewers there, but they act as like a human in the loop for the classification and correction system that you guys have built. How do you know when to send it to a human? Like how many nines of accuracy or precision are you guys kind of targeting? How do you kind of think about that?
That's how we build our mode. So we have the feedback loop of whether they apply fixes or not. And there could be many decisions not to apply fix, not to bother, or maybe fix is not wrong. So we look to the medical records of where we captured the mistake before to trace the destiny of this mistake, and we train our model on this feedback loop. But typically, they would like to have clean documentation in general. So we currently work with many clinics in alcohol rehabilitation space and drug addiction rehabilitation space. They, in general, per patient will have 40 to 80 mistakes at discharge. So you live in the hospital, it's time to bill for the care. They send documentation to a billing provider because they want to ensure their claim would not be denied. They find 40 to 80 mistakes per patient. They will fix all of them. That's where we were able to see, okay, where our tool maybe is not correct. We built own evals for that. Of course, that's, I think, very important for any company to have own evals in this moment. We don't have public data. The medical mistakes territory is very intimate for many hospitals and providers. Even if you look at like where the best public source of information would be on severe mistakes, that's court materials. So that's how we learn what's the most important.
That's an interesting moat. Like I could totally see it. Somebody's built a lot of ML systems in the past. That becomes a moat over time as you collect the data. It's hard to get to that data, and healthcare has a notorious long sales cycle. Like, how are you getting in the door with these hospitals and clinics so quickly?
So that's a strategy based on the Joint Commission review findings. As I mentioned before, the Joint Commission is a regulatory body that's industry regulatory, not government. But Medicare and Medicaid will listen to them, and if something is not good, you can be penalized on up to 3% of your hospital revenue from these programs. 3% doesn't seem much, but many hospitals operate on 4% margin for Medicaid, Medicare services. So essentially, if you're not following some standards in quality of care or in creating documentation that essentially indicates that quality of care, then you can be screwed up. Good hospitals will go every 3 to 5 years. If there are nothing in findings of the commission when they come to you, the next audit will be scheduled in 3 to 5 years. And the data on the audit date is public. Then, if you don't do well, it will be scheduled in 1 to 2 years. So you can naturally work backwards and prioritize hospitals that do have problems with the Joint Commission. And then you approach them. I do that myself and tell them that there's actually a way to fairly easy improve the quality of documentation without hiring more people or consultants, for instance. That for smaller clinics, the pitch is even simpler. We tell them that you don't need to have a doctor on site providing this oversight of activities to improve the quality of care. AI will do it for you. Very common thing in rehabilitation space is missing inventories. Inventory here on medical language will mean a completed questionnaire related to a topic. And these questionnaires, they are in the playbooks of medical associations. They are in playbooks of payers. But at the same time, they're treated by providers as admin task. And treating someone and know exactly what I'm doing, I don't need to ask them 12 questions about how they feel today. But if that questionnaire is not completed and attached, then it means that quality of care from all the perspectives of playbooks is not there. You can be penalized. And we just tell them that you don't need to chase your employees asking them to complete what's missing. We will be doing that on our own. So sales cycle is long. Nothing that I can say revolutionary about that when it comes to, but we try to prioritize those segments where we sell painkillers, not vitamins.
Yeah, and it is certainly a pain. They have budget and a need, and the timing's right. So yeah, it's a once you get to talk to the right people, they probably like, yeah, let's run a pilot. I'm assuming they're like, hey, let's give you some data, run a pilot, and then commit.
We were pretty successfully entered in the relationship with a couple of systems. Systems is a big group of hospitals and clinics where we got their patient data. We're HIPAA compliant. We can do that to demonstrate them that we find the same mistakes that they find manually today in these records automatically. So that's the best strategy, because at this moment it doesn't cost us much. We don't need to integrate with their systems to run such POC or pilot. But at the same time, it doesn't become a theoretical exercise. It becomes a very practical thing. We can tell them, you're going to review, 30% of charts in the next whatever XYZ time. You probably have historical for the same period. With half of that, we can see what mistakes are common. We will find you in the system. We will run it on your rest 15% of data. You can compare to your own findings. Likely, you will see you find more than your team does.
Why do you think it's the right time for something like this? I mean, it strikes me as something that you might have been able to build 10 years ago with NLP systems and stuff back then. Why is the LLMs just it enables you to kind of crawl all the unstructured data, make it structured, and then run a classification on top of it? Why do you think it's the right time for this?
So the idea of putting a layer of controls over clinical workflows is not novel by any means. Some big hospitals, they invested in creating scripts that will be looking for missing fields, incomplete data. And for each rule you want to track, you need to have a script, and you need to maintain the script. Just volume of scripts would be impossible for any hospital to digest. So hospitals address some of the critical parts of their workflows where they knew the problem, and only those hospitals who had big IT teams to dedicate some time and energy to that. And then I think machine learning over last, probably from 2015 to, allowed to attack another specific problem related to medical records, medical coding. So there are 3 types of coding, not going into details, but essentially medical documentation talks to finance via codes that describe your diagnosis. And there's so many implications of what happens next when the code is assigned that it's a big problem itself related to revenue cycle management. And we can say that AI connects to the medical records to maximize financial value for the provider through the coding process. So by the time Gen AI came to the market, some companies already figure out that, okay, medical records plus AI, we can do something with that in different areas. But they worked from the financial perspective all the time, because without Gen AI checking for all these rules and conflicts would be pretty much impossible. That's what really LLMs allow to do easily, because you now can maintain scripts on the same level of abstraction, which means how detailed they are, as they're written in medical playbooks and in regulatory websites. So Gen AI makes it simple, but at the same time, you need to address either false positives or equality, which LLMs today cannot do on their own. And partially because why they would not be able to go there quickly is it's not public data. So you cannot find medical charts online. Even when we started, I just decided to download my own my own data from my chart from the 3 hospitals I went to in the past, and just run the solution on this data to see how it finds some mistakes. Actually, they were like, I was happy living, as most of you do, not knowing about mistakes in my medical records, but they exist.
It's kind of scary. So you ran your own charts and you realized like, hey, they got some stuff wrong here.
Yeah, I was like, I believe that clinicians should be using AI to support decisions, because I wish that happened to me in the past. I remember when I came to the States in my first grad school, I thought that I'm in the United States, the medicine here should be this high quality. And I got very wrong treatment for my shoulder that I damaged during skiing. And it wasn't treated correctly because of that. I had 3 surgeries across 12-year span, spent a lot of time recovering, physical therapy, and so on. And I realized, looking at my medical records now, with my solution, that if I would be assigned MRI then time after I did my first X-ray, I would solve all the problems. I would likely never, I will probably get the right treatment at the time and would never be bothered again. But that didn't happen.
So let's talk really quickly for all the founders listening out there about fundraising. I mean, you've gone through YC twice. Clearly, YC puts a little win in your sales and the fundraising. Maybe you could impart some of your wisdom to the founders listening out there, like how to successfully fundraise and close a round.
It's a good question. I don't think there's any one single answer to that, but I think that those persons who fundraise, you need to have a lot of energy and to exhibit a lot of confidence to the world, and that's the most important. I think more important than anything else. And also, my advice probably would be, whatever is your strategy, don't bring people you don't like to the cap table. They just would not make your life better by any means. In opposite, if you like someone, try to make a room for them. I think a good rule of thumb. I am very grateful to YC community in general, because my cap table at this moment, even before YC and after YC, is 85%, mostly 90% probably now, are YC alum, either running funds or running their companies and do angel investing. And that also overlaps with healthcare focus, which I think brings our cap table to the point where there's a lot of great people from the industry, from both startup building and providing care to people, which is very supportive for the company execution, and not only execution, sometimes strategy.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, you don't do business with people you don't like. Yeah, just turn that money down.
That's a different when it comes to clients. Like we recently had a conversation, like how many clients startup founders really like versus those clients that they think like better behave differently.
Right.
And then just think natural that you need to deal with tough clients. If you're an enterprise and B2B sales, you need to deal with tough clients, because if someone sees the value in what you do and they're a powerful exec, they will try to get the maximum of own benefit from these relationships. But you build a company for them to get the benefit from these relationships. So prepare to deal with that.
And let's talk about the future. So if you look over the next, 1 or 2 years, what are you excited about for WorkDone?
As I learned from many experienced health tech founders, getting inside big health system, like system of hospitals and clinics, is half a way to success. But the first clinic is very important. And our strategy is now based on the urgency of systems and clinics who do have problems with medical documentation to buy and improve. For us, being case studies there with big hospitals and systems, I think is a fundamental success, because just staying within small clinics where sales cycle is quicker is good strategy, but at the same time, the opportunity to build the best solution for medical documentation compliance is there. And I don't see any fundamental obstacle for us not to get into big system and hospital, but still it's an industry where the sales cycle is one of the hardest compared to others.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, let's wrap up with a rapid fire. What is the first hospital, system, or clinic you visited as a founder or met with?
let me tell the name of that hospital, but the clinic actually, but it was a small clinic in Long Island where the owner of the clinic allowed us, all three founders, to come in and spend the day inside a hallway, just looking at how the clinic works from inside. And that was a very cool day, because we've learned so many things that we wanted to automate like immediately. We even wanted to, like we discussed in dinner, like maybe we should pivot from medical documentation only, because what we've seen there in terms of the workflows is crazy. Like when you come as a new patient to a hospital, you complete a questionnaire about your socioeconomic background. It's standard, whatever, 3-5 pages of check marks.
Yeah.
And then someone looks at that, and someone looks at a big cheat sheet that says, if combination of these responses, then assign codes, or if this is this, then it goes Z3BC, and it's just they decode that your 27 responses in combination of codes. They cannot keep that in their head, they just manually do that. You think like you can take a picture of that and that will be automated process, like we can build our prototype live coded tonight. And things like that. So that was very interesting to see that workflow and day to day. For instance, patient is an allergy clinic. Some people have chronic allergies that require them getting a shot every quarter or half a year. There is no software functionality of medical records to find these patients that are due for a shot. You need to look at them. Say, okay, you have this disease. When was your last shot? Okay, February. Now it was, July. We need to call you. There's so many redundancy that people spend their time on, and there's a big shortage of doctors and nurses now in the market. It's fundamentally not enough providers to keep the nation healthy. And they're spending, the existing providers spending their time on this, which are kind of admin tasks, but at the same time, they're essential for providing right care.
What's the hardest regulatory acronym in healthcare to explain to investors?
Like coding itself, HIPAA versus CPT or things like that. There's not like a single thing, but at first, when we started with customer development and healthcare, there was a lot of acronyms that we had no idea what people meant, like the Joint Commission, TJC, what TJC is. But at the same time, that's not a rocket science from that perspective. Everything is very logical. Everything is for a reason. It's just about like the language you speak.
HIPAA or SOC 2, what's more painful? SOC 2 is?
We were able to get to HIPAA very quickly because we prioritize it. I mean, HIPAA doesn't require you continue, so it's like SOC 2 Type 2. That's the thing. We're HIPAA compliant for 7-8 weeks, and we're still not SOC 2 Type 1 compliant. We're getting our audit next week.
Favorite founder lesson you learned at Electronique?
The churn is more important than the cost of acquisition.
I like that.
Because whatever your cost of acquisition is, fundamentally you will run into the problem when you spend X to lose X, to get Y and to lose Y because of the churn. It's just a question where in the curve you will hit that.
Yeah, I like that. I've sort of learned that as an investor as well, to watch those numbers, watch the retention. Would you rather fix documentation in Epic or reinvent it? Reinvent Epic?
That's an amazing question. I think if you would be building for like smaller clinics that are easier in terms of migration and adoption of software, then I will say like, let's build the EMR from scratch. I know many successful entrepreneurs now in health tech who went to nursing homes or senior living facilities, and they said like, I'm building end-to-end solution for you, from medical records to billing, all in once, for you to operate modern. But the reality of the industry is that it operates on databases built in 1979. It uses software that is not browser native, but desktop native. That software is customized to the degree where it's really hard to find similarities in data structures between hospitals inside the same network. So say you build for Epic and will automate documentation compliance in existing leaders rather than trying to make the fundamental shift to different user experiences.
That's like if I show you 2 implementations of Epic, I'll show you 2 different software systems, basically.
Likely. When I worked at UI, I recall big SAP implementation projects. And 100 million was considered a very big one. Fortune 500 companies will spend maybe 100 million, sometimes more, but hundreds of millions. That's a range of ERP system for a huge company. I know a couple of systems, healthcare systems, that will spend more than $1 billion this year or next year on Epic implementations. So you can think about the magnitude of complexity of work there, because this money are spent on data migration models and training and other things not related to software itself.
What's more dangerous to a startup, slow enterprise sales or overbuilt AI infra?
It's a good question. I think slow enterprise sales, because majority of startups I know do have very strong technical founders and not necessarily great enterprise salesmen.
That is usually the long pull. I was talking to a founder the other day. He goes, great software, 2 technical founders. He's like, yeah, go to market's hard. Go to market is hard.
Actually, even YC says now that it's easier to teach technical founder to do sales and marketing than vice versa.
I think that's true. Yeah. It's a little harder to learn to, maybe AI is changing that a little bit on both ends, but yeah.
It does.
We'll see how
it does.
If you guys weren't in healthcare, what industry would you be building for? Construction, I guess?
I recently canceled all the contracts we had in construction. It was a very painful moment because there's definitely a need for a compliance automation there. Huge one.
Is there a piece of advice you've received over the years, maybe from a VC or operator advisor, to maybe a YC partner that's stuck with you the most?
It's a good question. Keep trying probably would be my major one. Never stop trying.
Yeah, never give up.
Never give up.
Yeah, I like that one. What's one metric at WorkDone you watch every week, a metric that you look at every week that no one asks you about?
And no one asks me about that. That's a good question. My founders is so keen to details in general that I don't think there's any single metric or observation, quantifiable observation about WorkDone, either product or go-to-market, that we don't talk about. We believe in kind of data transparency in terms of all the data is shared within the team, even the data we consider like not relevant for other founders to understand. And we spend time looking into that. So we can name one.
So last question, as you look at, kind of healthcare and AI, over the next 10 years, what do you think is going to be the biggest change, 10 years from now?
I think the industry is well protected from kind of job replacement, but the leverage of human in general will be increasing. There's some very modern pockets of industry, let's say telemedicine, behavioral telemedicine. If we look at them, we will see that fewer number of doctors and nurses can serve greater population of patients. So I think that's overall trend that we will see, and we don't have a luxury not to get there because there is not enough doctors, as I said before. I hope that AI, first of all, will decrease the barrier for professionals entering the field in terms of learning and so on. See currently that there is some problem in doctors spending a lot of time on education, nurses probably not enough time on education, and then there's great leverage of nurses in the system. I think we will have more skilled people serving more patients. That will be number one. Then I believe in more and more people taking control, monitoring of their health. Came to surprise to me, but very small percentage of males in the States do annual checkups. As doctors say, it's impossible to get a man into a hospital if they feel well to check on how well they feel. So don't do that. I think that will change a lot. That sometimes, and I think in general, the role of provider may decrease a bit. I just feel it from my own experience. I'm going to do blood tests soon, maybe this week or next one. What I'm going to do with that, not even go to my doctor. I want to upload this to specific products that use LLMs to analyze because I already have my medical records available, and now I can add new blood tests and see, okay, tell me something about this. My past blood tests are there as well. So I think we will get more and more kind of control over well-being and health, not relying only on providers.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, I've recently signed up for mylifeforce.com. Like over the last year and a half, I'm getting my blood drawn every 3 months, and like really watching my biomarkers and trying to improve them with supplementation and some prescriptions. And don't wait. I mean, get your blood drawn and start taking charge of your health. And I do exactly what you said, which is plug my blood work and my supplements and my prescriptions into O3 and have it analyze it. And usually it has more insights than talking to a doctor, frankly.
My good friend is founder of bloodgpt.com, and he is repeatable founder as well. He had big exits. He has access to the top medical institutions in the world to do annual checkups. He ran his analysis through his product, compared notes from the clinic where he had annual checkup, and found that his technology is much more insightful for himself. He found an advice from his own product not to eat grapefruits. He never heard it from a doctor, but there was a very specific explanation of that your blood markers tell you that you will be allergic to grapefruits.
That's wild. Yeah. Well, where can folks find you online?
My LinkedIn, Dmitry Karpov. I'm busy to do that. I'm not very active on Twitter. I usually post to LinkedIn, so let's stay in touch there.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Brian.